Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Rory McLennan coming to you from Glasgow, Scotland. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. The Vatican announced on Thursday that Pope Francis will travel to the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan early next year, after having to postpone a trip there in July due to health reasons. The apostolic journey was announced in a statement from the director of the Holy See Press Office. According to the Vatican, Pope Francis will visit the DRC from January the 31st to February the 3rd, after which he will spend 2 days in South Sudan with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. The Vatican statement said Pope Francis would go to the DRC capital Kinshasa and later fly to Juba, the capital of South Sudan. The highlights of the Pope's apostolic journey will include a visit with representatives from charitable organisations in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in South Sudan, a meeting with internally displaced persons and an ecumenical prayer service. After the Respect for Marriage Act was approved by the United States Senate, the US bishops stated that society had lost sight of the purpose of marriage. The approval of the law was sharply denounced by Bishop Robert Barron, the leader of the US Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life and Youth. Bishop Barron said they are gravely disappointed that the misnamed Respect for Marriage Act passed the Senate and continue to call for its rejection. The Respect for Marriage Act, which requires that all states recognise homosexual marriages, was approved by the Senate on Tuesday. It redefines marriage to include unions between same-sex couples. With 12 Republicans voting in favour, the bill was approved with broad bipartisan support. The bill, as enacted by the Senate, expands and codifies the Supreme Court's Obergefell v. Hodges decision, which legalised homosexual marriage all over the country. A 25-year-old rule that barred the Australian territories from passing laws allowing for voluntary assisted suicide has been removed by the federal parliament. The Commonwealth, however, specifically prohibited the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory from doing so in 1997 by exercising its veto over them. The Senate's decision on Thursday to lift that restriction opens the door for the two territories to discuss and enact their legislation. Senators agreed to lift the prohibition without a formal count of votes for and against, and the Chamber and Public Gallery erupted in cheers. Former Northern Territory Chief Minister Marshall Perrin was also in the gallery. Perrin thanked Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for doing what his 5 predecessors didn't do for 18 years. Thursday's vote was the 4th attempt in almost 15 years to enfranchise territories' rights, following earlier unsuccessful efforts in 2008, 2010 and 2018. On Thursday, December the 1st, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI received the winners of the Ratzinger Prize in the Mater Ecclesiae monastery in the Vatican. The awards were handed over to French priest Father Michel Feydeau and the Jewish jurist Joseph Weiler by Pope Francis during a ceremony in the Clementine Hall. Both scholars discussed their research with the Pope Emeritus during the session. Father Feydeau is a French Jesuit priest who is currently a patristics and dogmatic theology professor at the Jesuit Centre Sèvres in Paris. The jurist Joseph Weiler teaches law at colleges and universities across the United States, the United Kingdom and in other countries. After the brief meeting, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI gifted books and medals to both winners. Earlier, during the award-giving ceremony, Pope Francis recalled that Benedict XVI's theology is not for the past, but is fruitful for the future. A recent Pew Research Centre study reveals that nearly a quarter of 198 countries and territories examined employed police and government force against religious groups that violated COVID-19 restrictions. The latest study, which was released on November the 29th and is part of Pew Research Centre's latest report on religious freedom restrictions starting in 2020, demonstrates how public health measures taken in response to the pandemic affected religious groups during the year it struck the world. The report found that in 69 countries, one or more religious groups defied public health measures imposed during the pandemic, including in the United States and in Canada. The Pew report revealed that 4 nations, India, Argentina, Italy and the United States, have experienced pandemic-related social hostilities towards religious groups that involved physical harm or vandalism by private individuals or groups. Pope Francis has released his December prayer intention, inviting the faithful to pray for volunteer organisations and for everyone involved. Through the final papal video of the year, the Holy Father urges the faithful to pray that individuals who work in volunteer organisations may serve as artisans of mercy. Furthermore, the Holy Father encourages volunteer organisations and individuals to continue advancing human dignity and the general good by working not just for, but also alongside and close to the people to better understand their needs. In the video, Pope Francis discusses the essential qualities that, in his opinion, should distinguish volunteer organisations, including closeness, solidarity, the capacity to listen, and complete self-giving. The Pontiff also emphasises how crucial it is for government and non-profit organisations to work together. The United Nations Human Rights Office for Southeast Asia has raised concerns over the Myanmar junta's new law, which makes registration mandatory for non-governmental organisations. According to the UN, these new rules would make it difficult for civic organisations in delivering essential goods and services to civilians. On October the 28th, the State Administration Council enacted a law requiring all domestic and international relief organisations to hold a government-issued registration certificate to work legally with communities in need. Individuals belonging to organisations that violate the new law will face 5 years of imprisonment. The rule imposed by Myanmar's junta, giving it broad control over aid delivery, has prompted concerns from various organisations. The President of Malta, George Vella, has stated that he is willing to step down if the Parliament passes a proposed abortion law. The Times of Malta reported that President Vella is worried that the proposed amendment would permit the termination of a pregnancy when a woman's health, rather than her life, is in danger. Were he to resign, he would be the first Maltese president to do so. Vella, a physician by profession, has always held a firm stance against abortion. Under the proposed legislation, the doctor and mother will be exempted from prosecution if their pregnancy is terminated for health reasons. Parliament will likely vote on the bill before the Christmas holiday, on or around December the 19th. A national protest is scheduled in the capital city Valletta next Sunday against the proposed bill to amend abortion law. The long-awaited trial of Catholic tycoon and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai, which was scheduled to begin today, has been postponed by Hong Kong's High Court until December the 13th. The Justice Department's request for an adjournment was granted by the 3 judges presiding over the case. The national security law, a strict regulation enforced by Beijing in the summer of 2020 to quell the demands of the pro-democracy movement, had been the subject of a request by the local authorities to the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. The democracy-supporting tycoon, who is 74, has been incarcerated since December in 2020. He is currently in prison for taking part in illegal protests and is facing 4 charges, 2 of colluding with foreign governments or outside elements, 1 of colluding with foreign forces, and finally of conspiring to print, publish, sell, distribute, and reproduce seditious publications. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Exarchate of Donetsk has warned that 2 of its clergy members may have been subjected to torture after they were taken into custody by Russian soldiers last week and has demanded their immediate release. In a November 30th statement deemed urgent, the Exarchate expressed its support for the clergy in the Zaporizhia region of Ukraine's city of Berdyansk. The 2 priests are Father Bogdan Galeta, an assistant at the parish of the Nativity of the Holy Theotokos, and Father Ivan Levitsky, who serves as its abbot. They were detained a few days ago for allegedly possessing explosives with the intent to engage in guerrilla activities against the Russian army. The Roman and Greek Catholic bishops of Ukraine recently declared a year of mercy from November the 27th, 2022 to the Feast of Christ the King on November the 26th in 2023, which will be devoted to showing solidarity with those in need, particularly those most impacted by the war. However, there is no clear end to hostilities in sight. In the latest mayhem unleashed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the armed forces have claimed that the rebels have killed at least 50 civilians this past Tuesday. On Thursday, the army said that M23 rebels killed the civilians in the eastern town of Kinshasa earlier this week. Many civilians are also reported missing. The military also charged the rebels with breaking a 5-day-old ceasefire in the nation's east. However, a spokesperson of the rebel group has denied their involvement in the massacre. The Vatican's nativity scene and Christmas tree for this year will be revealed on December the 3rd, during the annual tree-lighting ceremony in St. Peter's Square. The ceremony will be presided over by Cardinal Fernando Vergez Alzaga, the President of the Governorate of the Vatican City-State. Sister Raffaella Petrini, the Secretary-General, will also take part. The hamlet of Sutrio in northern Italy and the region of Abruzzo in central Italy, respectively, donated this year's nativity scene and tree. The decorations on this year's white fir tree, which stands 30 metres tall, were made by young residents of the La Quadrifoglio psychiatric rehab facility. The wooden Sutrio creche includes a semicircle that serves as the cave where the life-size statues of the Holy Family will be positioned. The nativity scene and the tree will remain on display until January the 8th, that being the feast of the baptism of Jesus. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has come out criticising a draft proposal by a Supreme Court judge that, if passed, would prohibit the display of religious symbols, including nativity scenes, in public buildings. During a press conference on Monday, the President said, "I'm not in favour of that. I believe that this has no legal basis or has to do with our traditions, with our customs, and I also believe that it is contrary to religious freedom." He expressed hope that the draft would not be approved. The move to ban religious symbols is the initiative of Judge Juan Luis González Alcántara. Religious people fear that the draft, if passed, would pave the way for further bans across the country. According to estimates, around 80% of people in Mexico are Catholics. And those are your latest headlines. Do join us again next time for more, and do remember, you can always visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.